right, good morning everyone. Thank you for attending our session today. I have the pleasure of having the next 20 minutes with Rebecca and John for a unwavering discussion around what needs to be done to be brave for corporate change in the near future. So both of you have had rather clear views on what needs to be done for years now. You need very little introduction. Could you please perhaps share briefly what these are and why you held them? Maybe Rebecca?
Thank you. I spent the first 20 years of my career studying change in large commercial organizations, including a year in Finland trying to persuade Nokia that Apple was a threat. I know how hard it is to change the core model of any organization. I have more than 20 years' experience on corporate boards. I understand that really doing things differently, particularly when the environment is hostile, when there are constantly new problems coming up, and when investors are insistent on short-term returns, is very hard. But I believe and continue to believe that what we need is a fundamental change in the orientation of business, away from profit as the primary goal, towards profit as the means to an end. What end? The end of human and natural flourishing. That we need to rebuild business models so that they center the continued stability of the climate and the natural world. That they center treating all employees, every stakeholder, with dignity and respect, and not as a thing to be manipulated. And so that they center creating a political and social environment that supports these goals. Because, of course, if policy is in line with these goals, everything is much, much easier. I understand how hard this is, but I also understand that it is entirely possible. I spent much of my career documenting the ways in which firms can move in this direction, in which they can be commercially profitable. It takes courage, it takes persistence, it takes creativity, but it is eminently possible.
John, what is your view, and to what extent does it converge with Rebecca's?
Well, bonjour tout le monde, premièrement, and happy birthday to the Women's Forum. Your comments just now made me think. In 2003, 2004, I was working in Detroit with Bill Ford of the Ford Motor Company. And I remember, like your Nokia story, saying to 20 of his senior engineers, there's this interesting little company out there called Tesla, and there's this guy called Elon Musk. Have you noticed him? And the response was, and I'll never forget it, we tried electric vehicles 100 years ago. It didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. And just look what's happened. I mean, Elon's now got his $1 trillion pay package. There's a happy camper. But at the same time, I think that pay package signals the ultra-corruption of capitalism. Doesn't mean that there isn't value being created there by that man. There clearly is. But I was just saying, behind the scenes, before we came on stage, and I may be delusional. My wife, Elaine, is in the audience. She knows I can be delusional. But when I think about the future, and I think about the next 20 years for the Women's Forum, I think what an astonishing period of our collective history we're now moving into. And I've worked 50 years now with business and financial markets, trying to get them to embrace exactly the agenda that Rebecca was just talking about. And it's been ups, and it's been downs, and it's been ups, and now we're going into the mother of all downs. But the reason why I'm excited, and the reason why I'm energized, is that I think for as long as people think they know what the system is, and they know what the system dictates that they should do, they will listen to us politely, and then they'll have us go somewhere else. We're at a moment now where, thanks to Donald Trump in many ways, he didn't intend it, but we're now in a period where everything is in flux. People do not know what they're meant to be doing. And I think that's the biggest opportunity of my working lifetime. I'll stop there.
when everything changes, nothing changes in a way. There is a promise of stability in great instability. That's a really interesting idea. There's a lot of opportunities. So you have a floor of business leaders in front of you. What do you think are the priorities for them to make your vision happen? Yes, Rebecca.
I feel nervous saying this in public.
Good.
But I think the priority is to slow down and really think about what's actually happening. And what is actually happening is not the probability, but the near certainty that we're going to see massive disruption in the next 20 to 30 years. I know of at least one major European government where their staff came back to them with a report suggesting that there was likely to be significant disruption. The phrase was rolling systemic breakdown in energy, food, and transportation within the next 5 years. I mean, to your point, this is going to be wild. And in that moment, I think the most helpful thing is to center, it sounds so self-indulgent, but to center on why we're doing what we're doing, what we think is really important. Most of the business leaders I know are immensely proud of what they do. The provision of goods and services at a decent price to people who need them, that's a great way to make a living. But right now, we need more. We need more. We need a response to what's happening.
How can we design marketplaces then? How can we do it? Because it's such a systemic problem, right?
So it's so easy to say, and it's so hard to do. I mean, I have a TED talk talking about why we need carbon pricing, and there I am in my red jacket, and what we need is a price for externalities. Intellectually, it's easy. But we need to come to believe that it is, here's the bit that makes me really nervous, it is a moral imperative. That not to act as if the future of the planet was important, not to act as if we have to get the carbon out of the business models, we have to get the waste out, we have to act differently, is absolutely central to what it means to be alive. That not to do so is to perpetuate a moral wrong on the scale of centuries. And really tap into that part of ourselves that says, this is not okay. I am going to change. We are going to change. We're going to put these rules in place. We're going to insist these rules go into place. So yes, a price for carbon, decent working conditions, minimum wage, voice for labor. We know what the policies look like. It's doing them.
Sounds good. What about you, John? Anything to add? Anything to add?
Several things. When I was 14, I read a book which some of you will have read called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. And he talked about paradigm shifts. So this was a book published in 1961 or 1962. And I've periodically gone back to that book, which has meant that our home is full of different copies that I bought elsewhere, trying to test whether what I remembered about the book's conclusions were right. And what Kuhn said, and some of you will remember, was a paradigm shift is not putting an extra stripe of color on a toothpaste. It's something that happens every 70 to 80 years, and it takes about 78 to 80 years to crank through. And towards the end, and we are actually at the ending stage of a paradigm shift, which started in the late 50s, early 60s. The acceleration is extraordinary. Doesn't mean that the acceleration always takes you where you need to go. It can take you some really unstable directions as well. But I think the next 10 to 15 years are going to see profound change. And one of the things I think will happen as a result of that is that the leadership cohort, the generation of people in leadership roles or generations, will change and change profoundly. As a male in a largely female environment, I don't want to bring up tension and conflict and war. But if you look at what happens in the early years of a war, you've got people who do not understand what's happening to them, stumbling into one problem after another. After about 18 months, 2 years, they get replaced by people who do understand. And I think Rebecca's point about disruption, these rolling systemic disruptions that are going to hit much faster than most of us might imagine, they're going to call forth a very different form of leadership. Some of it will be female, some of it will be male, but most of it will be people we've never previously heard of. In the same way in 2003-04, Bill Ford couldn't see Elon.
So things are going to go very fast, and you seem to point to the importance of having a very strong moral compass, is what I understand, which is really interesting because I'm a professor in the business school, you too. It's not really something we teach, the moral compass, right? I mean, we have students who come and they are prepared. They have their own values. They bring their own values to the classroom. So that's kind of an interesting idea to think of as an educator, right? How do you shape someone's moral compass in the right direction to, for instance, use AI, which is part of the disruptive change that's happening, in a good way, right? Because we all know we're all both enthusiastic about AI and its promise and scared about it. How would you change the way we educate kids and adults in our schools to do the right thing?
In 3 minutes.
Yeah. Please.
So a few weeks ago, I co-taught an executive class with a professor called Hitendra Wadhwa, who's a professor at Columbia. His radical idea is leaders need to operate from the deepest sources of wisdom and love inside them. It's pretty radical in a business setting, but it's the most highly subscribed course at Columbia. He has an AI tool that I think is fascinating because, of course, you can tell the students, treat people with dignity and respect, operate from love, show kindness in all your actions, and they can look at you in a kind of bemused way. So what he's created is an AI bot that lets you practice. So you're going into your boss who has overlooked you, and you're really feeling feeling very angry about what's happened. And, but how do you talk to your boss with kindness and dignity? And so you try something, and the bot says, you get 2 out of 5. Try again. And so what's embodied in the bot and in his teaching are the micro-level behaviors. How do we act with kindness and dignity? How do we see the people we're surrounded by and we need to work with exquisite tenderness? Now, don't get me wrong. Love is the answer, but it's not the only answer. I have a new friend called James Rhee who recently published a book called Red Helicopter, Leading with Kindness and a Little Math. And it's a great book. It's how he turned around a retailer that sold plus-sized fashion to African-American women in suburban US neighborhoods. He's an Asian-American man. His background was in private equity. He came into the firm as it was failing. And he decided to try something radical, to operate with complete authenticity and connection, to do everything he could to support his African-American female colleagues on the front line in creating in clothing stores in strip malls a center of community and joy. He returned to his investors 6x, not just through the kindness and respect and connection, but being a ferociously productive and creative business person. We're going to need both. Excellent management, excellent operations, wonderful strategy, and complete authenticity, kindness, and presence. And yes, AI can help, but it'll be a tool. This has to be from the heart.
Yes. What's interesting about what you mentioned about AI is it can help us feel better. Something
exactly.
that other researchers have talked about. AI can actually lead us towards a more feeling economy. right? Which is not always intuitive. John, you've been on 80 boards. Have you witnessed what Rebecca just mentioned? Is that a trend? Are we moving towards a kind of world?
Well, a couple of things, if I may. The first one is simply to say that we're going to have to get business leaders to do something that they've been told for 50 years not to do. So I've worked with companies like Shell at the same time that they've been attacked for what they were doing in Nigeria or issues like that. And for most of my working life, the idea that we would ever want business leaders to stand up in public and take a political position was, it was just outlandish. And it was outlandish because we didn't trust them. Or we did trust them. We thought if they stood up, they'd always go the wrong direction. But now we absolutely need political change. We need policy change. We need to change the system. And we have to have business leaders very actively and consistently involved in that game over time. Now, what we're seeing, by contrast, is many people who've made fairly glib, public statements and commitments backing off. I think that's normal. I mean, it's what we do as human beings. We try something out, doesn't work, we back off a bit. So that's the first thing. I think we need a more political role for business leaders. The second thing to AI, about 8 or 9 years ago, I thought, AI is coming up in the future, so I'll go and see some of the companies that are leading the charge. So I went to see people like HP and Palo Alto or DeepMind before they were acquired by Google and so on. What I found was very striking, that these people that I was talking to were largely about a third my age. Their brains worked about 15 times faster, but when you actually talk to them, without exception, they were interested in what we call sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals and so on, and they wanted to see how AI could play into that space. And my conclusion is that anything like sustainability is not possible without AI, but for AI to play that role, we've got to become very much more actively involved than we have been.
Right, so we need to actively shape AI rather than be submitted to its imperatives, sort of, yeah? Okay, so both of you are very clear on the fact that the change needs to be systemic. What makes me uncomfortable with that is that you have leaders in front of you, they're individuals, and they might go like, okay, that worked. Easy, I don't have to do anything. I'd like us to end on the one recommendation that you would make on top of having systemic change and going for systemic change. To individuals today, what would you tell the leaders in this room? What's the one thing they can change tomorrow that you think would head in the right direction and have traction?
They can build an example of what we're talking about. Pick an area in the firm, run it this way, show that it works. If you put everything behind it and you really believe you need to do it, you will absolutely succeed. My experience is people are hungry to focus in this way. Talk explicitly about the need to do things differently, about the need to act from your deepest self. Practice it, put it into the business model, talk about it with your employees and your customers, and show that it's possible. That's how change begins.
I agree with that, but let me just add something else, which is slightly counterintuitive, perhaps. Since COVID, we've all been encouraged to stay home. We're getting over it. But one of the things that happened as a result of that period in our collective history is people did not go out as often as they used to visit the future. And I think the future is out there in so many different iterations. It's very easy to conclude that what we're talking about here is impossible because, Trump, because of the, coming recession, because of all sorts of different reasons. But earlier this year, for example, I went to Amazonia for the first time with Natura, the very large and successful Brazilian cosmetics and beauty company. And we went round their supply chain there. We went with people from Oxford University, Generation, Investment Management, and so on. And that was astonishing. We came back thinking quite differently about what is possible because it's already happening. And things can't be impossible if they're already out there and being done. So don't just go on your own. Go with colleagues. Take a team of people with you, and I'll bet you come back thinking differently.
Rebecca, John, thank you very much for your intervention this morning. Very much appreciated.